This is episode 360 of That Shakespeare Life. Just like the work of William Shakespeare, That Shakespeare Life is powered by our patrons. Listeners just like you can access bonus history content for every episode, along with special extras like animated plays, lesson plans, and even documentary films, all by signing up as a patron at patreon.com/thatshakespearelife. Sign up today and stay tuned after the episode for even more details.
Hi, I'm Lynn Bowser from the Argety Red Kite Project, Central Scotland's only red kite feeding station. Another great method for studying the life of William Shakespeare includes listening to this. It's That Shakespeare Life with my friend Cassidy Cash.
We found the word Walsingham. Francis Walsingham is very well known as having been the spymaster of Queen Elizabeth I, and also the story of Mary Stuart being put on trial and executed based on some interception and surveillance by Walsingham is also well known. So when we saw the word Walsingham, we said, oh, wow.
Welcome to That Shakespeare Life with Cassidy Cash. Cassidy believes that if you desire to successfully learn or perform Shakespeare's plays, then understanding the real life and history of William Shakespeare himself is a must. That Shakespeare Life is the podcast that helps you go beyond the curtain of some of Shakespeare's most iconic works and explore the world of early modern England as Shakespeare would have lived it, learning from the writers, historians, and performers who know it best. And now, here's Cassidy.
In As You Like It, Orlando says, which I take to be either a fool or a cipher. That's one of a dozen references to ciphers in Shakespeare's plays, which reflect the place of ciphers as a common way to keep secrets, particularly among the elite, for Shakespeare's lifetime. One of the most famous ciphers for Shakespeare's lifetime was written between 1578 and 1584. While Shakespeare was just getting his career started in London as a playwright, he had just gotten married and was starting his family, and these letters were written down by none other than Mary, Queen of Scots. For 19 years prior to her execution, Mary, Queen of Scots was imprisoned in England, and during that time she wrote extensively, including letters in code. It was known that between 1578 and 1584, just 3 years before her death, Mary wrote a series of letters in code to the French ambassador. But those letters were considered to have been lost. Surprisingly, the letters survived, but because they consist of unreadable encoded text, no one knew what they were about, and they were stored away in unrelated collections in the National Library of France, where they went unexplored until 400 years later. In 2023, an international team of codebreakers happened to stumble upon the documents when they were looking for historical ciphers in order to crack them. They not only found Mary's lost letters, but managed to decode them and to present the contents to the world for the first time in almost half a millennia. Lead author and Israeli computer scientist George Lasry is here today to tell us about the team's efforts, the decoding process, what Mary wrote, and why it was so important for the letters to be in cipher in the first place. Dr. George Lasry is a computer scientist in the high-tech industry and a member of the Decrypt and Cryptool projects specializing in deciphering historical ciphers. He has cracked German ciphers from the First and Second World Wars, papal and French ciphers from the 16th, 17th, and 18th centuries, along with hundreds others. In 2022, together with Norbert Biermann and Satoshi Tomokiyo, he discovered and deciphered more than 50 letters from Mary, Queen of Scots thought to have been lost. These letters are considered, according to her biographer, Dr. John Guy, to be the most important new find on Mary Stuart, Queen of Scots, for 100 years. George Lasry regularly speaks at events related to historical ciphers such as HistoCrypt and the NSA Cryptologic History Symposium. A list of his publications on historical ciphers and more information on this particular project related to Mary, Queen of Scots are all in the show notes for today's episode. Before we get into our conversation, I want to let you know that you can see some of the history we're talking about today, including images of Mary's lost letters, some graphical text that she wrote in, and translations of those letters in the detailed show notes available for patrons. Go to our regular show notes page for this week at CassidyCash.com/episode 361 and click on the Patreon button to unlock all the extras while you listen to the show. And now let's dive into the history. Hello, George. Welcome to That Shakespeare Life.
Thank you very much for having me.
The combination of people and events that led to this discovery is surprising. And I think our first question has to be, why was an international team of computer scientists looking into the Italian section of the archives at the National Library of France in the first place? Outline the circumstances here that led you to being in the right place to discover Mary's lost letters.
Yeah, so we are a team of three, I would say, interdisciplinary folks. I'm a computer scientist, but two of my colleagues, one of them from Germany, Norbert Biermann, is a musician, professor of music, actually. And my Japanese colleague is a patent expert with his education was in astrophysics. We come from very diverse background, but we are all fascinated by historical cipher. Since we are not historian, basically, and we do it mostly for fun, what we do, we are constantly looking for new ciphers in archives that have not been deciphered. We don't really care who wrote them and when and why. All we want is the intellectual challenge of cracking those ciphers. And this is the way we found those ciphers. We were just combing the Bibliothèque Nationale de France, the French National Library, for cipher documents. And actually, it was my Japanese colleague just found those a couple of dozens of pages of documents with only graphical cipher symbols, with no clue to the timing, their sender, recipient, and so on. And he tried to crack them, but the code was a little bit sophisticated. So as a computer scientist, I have additional tools to break them. And I was very, very lucky to crack the code. But only after we cracked the code, we discover where they were coming from. So basically, I would say that we just do it as a passion, and we just systematically go in archive, especially the online archives, and we look for new challenges for fun.
What an exciting hobby to have with that. Once you found them, why did Mary write these letters in code? I mean, there were lots of other options like letter locking or a secret emissary or some other security measure, I guess. What was the purpose of writing them in cipher?
Well, cipher was the main method to conceal messages. I mean, you could also, hide them in some place or use steganography, which is basically secret ink or other methods to disguise even the fact that you are writing a letter. In most cases, the best way to conceal the content of the letter is to encipher them. And it was quite a common practice at the time for kings, for nobles and generals in army and so on, to use cipher for the secret communication. So the idea was that if you send a letter with a courier and this person is captured on the way, then the people that are intercepting those letters will not be able to read their contents.
Now, Mary's letters were going from England, written by a Scottish queen, and addressed to an ambassador in France named Michel de Castelnau. And this is 3 countries involved in this communication at this point. Does Mary's use of this cipher indicate that she and the French ambassador had worked out some kind of code beforehand, or was there an internationally known coding system? You're saying that it was common for letters to be disguised by cipher, but how did the French ambassador know how to read it?
Yeah, so first we need to understand how those code works. So basically, if you want to encode a letter, you need some table, which we call the key, basically, which maps, let's say, each letter of the alphabet into a specific cipher symbol. And then whenever you write some text, then you just replace the letters with the specific symbol that are used to encode them. And you have a table that maps each of those letters to those symbols. And the receiving end, they should have the same table, and then they will look up for the symbol in that table and look and find out to which letter of the alphabet they correspond, and then they could this way decipher the letters. So basically 2 sides communicating in cipher, they will have in front of them the same cipher key or the same table for deciphering and enciphering. The key itself, the table, was different for various people using various keys and various sender and recipient, because you don't want someone else to be able to read your encipher letter, then you have to use your own code. But that basic method of sending by code and having a shared key was quite common. What was also common at the time is that to make the cipher more secure, actually you had more than one option to encode each letter of the alphabet. For example, you could have the letter A could be encoded by a round and a dot or something like that. Another way to make the code more secure was to have a list of names and common words, and each of them would have their own cipher symbol. So that if let's say that I'm a code breaker and I don't have the key, then I want to recover the key. The first thing I'm going to do to look is for repetition. I'm going to make some statistics of the symbol that I see. I want as much as possible to conceal, let's say, the patterns that you will see in a normal language. For example, in English, the letter E, you will see it about 12% of the time. So if I just count the most frequent cipher symbol, then it's probably going to be E. So to conceal that, there were various methods, as I mentioned, to have multiple symbols per letter and also to have names and common words encoded with their own symbols.
So would Mary have sent the key to the French ambassador? Or, well, I mean, I guess I'm asking, do you know if he would have been expecting her letters? I mean, or did she have to mail him the key separately?
One of them had to probably design it. By the way, we don't know who created that table, that cipher table. Because first, we don't have it. We reconstructed it, but we don't have it's not in the archive. And many times, by the way, you can find in the archive the original key, the original table to decipher. In that case, we don't have it. So we don't know who created that. We think it might probably be the French side, but we are not sure. So basically, one side decides on the cipher, they create a table, they take a copy of the table of the key, and then they bring it with their trusted courier to the other side, and then they start to communicate in cipher. That will be the way to establish communication.
Did historians know Mary had written these letters before your team found them in the library?
Yes and no. So there was suspicion that some letters were missing for her correspondence, because we know that Mary left hundreds, if not thousands, of letters, and many of them are documented in very large volumes of her correspondence. And sometimes those letters mention other letters which are not found in the archive. For example, she said, in reference to my letter from the 12th of February, then blah, blah, blah. And then historians looking for that letter on the 12th of February, they would not find it. And it's okay. So they knew that such a letter existed. They did not know where it was. There have been quite a few projects to uncover letters of Mary, Queen of Scots. And they are today published, quite a few, many of them. But still there were gaps. There were some letters that we deciphered that were unknown, so they were not referenced elsewhere.
When you discovered the letters, since you're not looking for Mary, Queen of Scots' history in particular, you were just looking to undo ciphers. What was it about? Was it how the letters were labeled, or was there a detail inside that caused you to suspect they were from Mary?
Not at all. I mean, if you look at, basically you have the collection in the French National Library, and sometimes in the catalog, they say something, but what they said in the catalog was not very helpful. And sometimes you look at other material inside the same collection, and in a specific collection, it was quite misleading because you had a lot of material from Italy, even some letters in Italian, and most of them were from the first half of the 16th century. And Mary was born in 1542, so she was active in the second half, so you could not make the connection just by the material or the catalog in the French Library. And the only way to find out what it's in those letters is actually to decipher them. So this might also explain why historians never discovered them, because if you look at a letter, you will see only graphical symbol. Sometimes when you have ciphered letter, then the beginning is not in cipher. You have a date and you have dear Cardinal someone, and then you have signed by someone, and sometimes a place in clear text. So you know what it's about. You don't know what it's inside, but you know what it's about. In that case, all you had were very dense line of graphical symbol, and you can read them only if you crack the code. So typically historians don't crack code. I mean, they want to, they go to files which they know what they are about, and But if they see codes, and they don't have no idea what those codes are about, then they are not going to break them. Otherwise, that's the only reason why those letters, this real treasure, actually has been lying in plain sight for 400 years of later.
Once you decided that maybe these are the coded letters of Mary, Queen of Scots, what was the process of confirming that suspicion?
Yeah, so it was actually a discovery in phases, and a quite exciting one, actually, because we started the decipherment process, but it was in stages. It's like an onion with many layers, and every time you peel a layer of this onion until you get to the core, and then you know what it's about. So first, we didn't know it was in French, by the way. I mean, the first thing that we did was to test an Italian hypothesis. So in the software that I'm using to crack ciphers, then one of the parameters that I can set up is the language. And actually, I started with Italian, but then I got nowhere because I had some garbage Italian. And either way, I almost forget about those letters because I say, okay, I can't break them, so I will do something else. Only about 1 year later, in 2022, I would just run out of ciphers to break because I'm all the time breaking ciphers. And they say, okay, let's go back to those letters. And I say, okay, French National Library, maybe they're in French. And then I suddenly started to see fragments of text in French. And then I had made more progress in the decipherment, and I started to see meaningful words. So this is how we got to Mary Stuart, but it was not in one step. It was not, in a eureka moment, you say, okay, to decipher, you read Mary Stuart, and that was not the process. So basically, I first saw that there were some words that were in feminine form, because in French, adjectives you have masculine and feminine. So I said, oh, probably a woman in the story. And then that woman mentioned mon fils, which is my son. Okay, she has a son. And then she mentioned ma liberté, my liberty. So if you are free, there is no reason why mention your liberty. So, okay, French, writing in French, woman has a son in captivity. So at that stage, Mary Stuart was one of the suspects. But then, after a few more layers of that onion that we had to peel, then we found the word Walsingham. Francis Walsingham is very well known as having been the spy master of Queen Elizabeth I, and also the story of Mary Stuart being put on trial and executed based on some interception and surveillance by Walsingham is also well known. So when we saw the word Walsingham, we said, oh, wow. That was really, I would say, the real eureka moment, and that's where we got really excited because it was quite impossible. I mean, how can we, a non-historian, just amateur codebreaker, find the documents that historians will pay a very dear price to put their hand on, and we are the one to discover them. That was not the end of the story because at that stage we were not 100% sure that this Mary Stuart. And also, we were also concerned whether those letters are really new to historians. Because many times when you decipher a letter, you will find out that the same deciphered letter is actually somewhere in another archive. So what's the big deal? We started to look for copies of those letters elsewhere, and then we found a few in a few places. And then the question was, is it new? Is it not new? Maybe, if most of those letters are new, this is something sensational. If they are not, then that's not a big deal. So at the end of the day, after 6 months of research, we found out that out of the 57 letters that we deciphered, only 7 were known and 50 are really new and are very, very interesting.
That's an incredible find. And you've inspired a whole bunch of our students and high school, college listeners who are now inspired to think that they can go into an amateur hobby and accomplish something exciting. So you don't have to be in the field you think you are to accomplish such cool things. That's very fun.
Yes, definitely. And some historians also said that you have not to be in that field in order to do those kinds of discovery.
Yes, I've heard that too, where it's like, well, you did it because no one told you couldn't. So
yes.
There you are. Well, so you found 57 total letters.
Yes.
Do you have reason to think that there may be more?
They may because for the same reason. By the way, we found them. Satoshi, my Japanese colleague, we first found the 2026 or something, and then Satoshi found another cache in the French library in another collection, totally unrelated to Mary Stuart. So there may be additional letters somewhere in the French library or elsewhere. So it's always a good idea to look for them, and there might be some more treasure like that just waiting to be discovered.
So please share with us some snippets from the letters. What did they say once you decoded them? Were there bits of information that were shocking or that changed what we thought we knew about Mary, Queen of Scots, and her time in prison in England?
Shocking? Usually no. Usually when what you find in deciphered letter is most of the time coherent with what you know from other sources. But in the case of Mary Stuart, what was very interesting is that there is a perception, and it's also one of the sources of that perception is Stephen Zweig with his famous Mary Stuart play and book, that she was someone very emotional and intuitive and not very rational in her decision. That was the perception until now for most of the historians. Some of them did not, by the way, did not have that view. But when you read those letters, and there is a lot of material, actually, there is enough to fill a book, 50,000 words in total, something like that, then you see that she's a very astute queen. She's very well connected. She knows how to manipulate people. She knows how to buy loyalties. She knows how to bribe. She knows how to recruit spies and associate and allies, and then try to make the most of quite difficult conditions. But we see various threads, various direction of negotiation that she had during her captivity in order to influence her fate and influence what's going on in Scotland and trying to get free and reinstalled as the Queen of Scotland. And this is something that it was only partially hinted in other sources, but when in the letter you see that in very, very clear terms and with a lot of detail and colors. I would say that's the main insight that you will see overall in the letters, that the perception changes totally when you read the letters. But there are a few topics that are mentioned, and I can mention a couple of topics, and I will try to give you a couple of quotes, but they are in French, so I will have to translate them. So there is a lot about her relationship with Queen Elizabeth I. She tried to kind of portray the relationship as if they were sisters and women in power, and a lot of men not wanting women in power and so on. But you can see that she's not happy with the Queen actions with her. And for example, she writes to Castelnau. Castelnau was the French ambassador to Elizabeth I. So he was in London. And he visited the Queen quite often. And then, for example, she writes to Castelnau, I know that sometimes she suddenly feels offended and gets angry, openly cursing me, but after giving the matter some more thought, she calms down. And we know from other sources that Queen Elizabeth sometimes has those bursts of anger against various people, but eventually she made decision in a more cool way and more calculated way. So this is the relationship with Elizabeth, and she also complains a lot about her health because she's in captivity. It's captivity it's not a prison. It's not a traditional prison because she had dozens of servants around her, and she had 4 meals a day, with each meal with 16 courses, and there was quite a lot of luxury. But because she was kept in a closed settings most of the time, then her health started to deteriorate, and then she complains from time to time. For example, she asked that the Queen of England allow her to use her carriage to go out because she has some nervous breakdown, and she's afraid that she won't be able to even to walk or to ride the next winter. There is a lot about how to try to bribe the members of Elizabeth I, the privy council of the Queen. A lot of quotation. Wilson, for example, one of the commissioners, she writes, Wilson whom I am convinced can be bought over over time with money, but this must be done in secret. So basically, she's asking from Castelnau, the French ambassador, to try to buy this Wilson with money. At the end, the Wilson will not be bought. We know that, but she's trying. And she's also trying to buy another one. Robert Bill was responsible for some negotiation with her, and she also tried to bribe him, but it didn't work very well. And then there is also a figure which it is well known for the scholars of Elizabeth I. It's Robert Dudley, the Earl of Leicester. Some historians suspect that he might have been Elizabeth's secret lover. And in the beginning, Mary and Dudley are in good terms, but later she understands that this Dudley is plotting against her and wants her dead or in prison, and then she asks Castelnau to warn the queen, actually, that, and this is what she writes, that so Dudley and the Puritans, in league with Scottish rebels, profess against what she calls the rule of woman, and it is feared that they might abduct the queen. So we know that Dudley never tried to abduct the queen, but she's trying to create some kind of sympathy and a common fate with the Queen Elizabeth and as two women, but it didn't work very well. There is also a lot about Walsingham, the spy master who is responsible for the surveillance over her, and she writes to Castelnau, "Beware of Walsingham, as he is a cunning man, hiding his true intention under the pretense of a false friendship." And other non-very flattering mention. I think the most personal letter, most of the letter, by the way, they are more about, I would say, diplomacy, diplomatic moves and maneuver than personal letters. So even when she talks about her feeling, usually she has a purpose. She will say, my health is not very well, but because I want that and that to happen. So the only place in which her letters are not entirely diplomatic and there is also a personal tone is when her son, James, will be in the future James VI of Scotland and King James I in England, when he's abducted in 1582 by a pro-British faction in Scotland. And then he's quite in captivity, basically, and she learns about it, and then she writes to Castelnau, let me see, "I just received the news of my son's abduction by the partisan of the Earl of Angus, one of the plotters. I'm severely restrained, not even allowed to send letters. Please ask the king to write to the Queen of England, ask her not to intervene." So she's trying to prevent the queen from taking action that will be on the advantage of the plotters. And then she also writes, "I am stuck in bed, so troubled that I don't know what to say or do, seeing my son in the hands of our most cruel enemies, without being able to help or get support." And this is how she expresses of kind of her distress and that she cannot really do too much about what happened to her son. Eventually, her son was not so stupid, and he was young, but he found his way with the plotters, and he restored his own power, and he became a very powerful king, both of Scotland and later from England. And then you will find in the letter a lot about secret communications. So basically, not only the letter were in cipher, but she also wanted to make sure that Walsingham doesn't know that those letters even exist or are exchanged. So basically, she would also write in letters that will go via Walsingham, that will be open or official letters, that will be sent by Walsingham to the French ambassador in parallel to the secret letters. So sometime she would like Castelnau to know something and also to make official that he knows something. So she'll write to him, "I'm going to write you something in an official letter so that you can say that you have heard that from me." there is good evidence that actually that secret this existence of the secret communication was kept confidential for quite a while. That was the case until 1583, when Walsingham was able to recruit a mole in the French ambassador house, and that mole provided him with copies of all the letters that Castaner received or sent. And at that time, and by the way, this is the reason why we have copies of some of the letters, because those 7 of those letters were kept in British archive in Walsingham files in the British Library. But before that, the British did not know about that communication, so it was quite effective.
He didn't know about it at all for quite a long time. Yes. And even when he discovered them, he only found 7 of her entire... Wow, that's impressive. Because Walsingham was no slouch, he was on top of stuff. So she got that past him is a feat to have accomplished, I think.
Definitely.
Well, I know this is very exciting, and we would love to know more about your work as well as your team and even the letters themselves. Where should we go if we want to learn more about decoding ciphers, your team and the work they did on this, as well as being able to see some of Mary's letters and where they've been decoded? Where can we see some of this information?
Yeah, so first there is my paper, our paper that you can see, I will guess, in the comments of that podcast. And then if you want to know more about the historical cipher, there is a great book by David Kahn, The Codebreakers, and which also mentioned Mary Stuart and this, especially what happened towards the end of her life and how one of her cipher was caught and used as evidence to condemn her and to execute her. Those are the main sources for new information.
Yes, we will place links to George and his team's publication in the show notes for today's episode, so you can go directly and read that. We will also place a link to this book he's recommended, so stay tuned for the URL for where to find those. Now, George, we ask everyone this next question here at That Shakespeare Life, and that's, what's the one book you would take with you on a deserted island? My friends in England tell me I'm supposed to allow you the complete works of Shakespeare and a copy of the Bible, so your choice would be in addition to those.
I thought a lot about that, and I'm afraid that what I would like to take with me in a deserted island will be a computer with codes to break. And no books.
Of course, we would expect nothing less.
Yes.
Well, I think that would be a delightful way to spend your deserted island visit. So,
yes.
Well, but now that you've uncoded these, what cipher are you working on next? What's new for you? What are you working on now that you're excited about?
Plenty. There is always a new cipher to break and a new era to discover. And also what's fascinating is that whenever we work on a cipher, we learn about the historical events and the context. So I'm working on quite many, too many, by the way. It's quite of multitasking, but it's a great fun, and there is a lot of things to crack, and there are new secrets to discover.
Well, this sounds wonderful. George, Lasry, thank you so much for being here this week and for helping us explore this part of history. This is really exciting, especially for us that are thrilled about this particular time period in history. This has been fun to explore what she was doing and what she wrote about. Thank you so much, both for your work and for being here to share about it with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
You can find more about George and his team, along with that organized list of resources I promised you, all packed into the show notes for today's episode. Find these things at CassidyCash.com/episode 361. That's CassidyCash.com/EP361. While you're there, don't forget to click on the detailed show notes button to join us as a patron if you'd like to see the bonus history related to today's show. In addition to the bonus history, patrons get access to a library of related content, including video versions of the podcast, sneak peeks at upcoming shows, a video library of documentary films, and animated versions of Shakespeare's plays. And we even have a collection of educator resources, including hands-on history activity kits that let you try out some of the history you learn about on the show right at home or in your classroom. There's a lot to unpack being a patron of That Shakespeare Life, and you can find it all at patreon.com/thatshakespearelife. That's patreon.com/thatshakespearelife. That Shakespeare Life is researched and produced by me, Cassidy Cash. Our audio engineer is Gary Mayholm. That's it for this week. Thank you for listening. I'm Cassidy Cash, and I hope you learned something new about the Bard. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to That Shakespeare Life. As always, the best conversations happen after the episode over at CassidyCash.com. Become a part of a vibrant Shakespeare conversation by adding your voice over at the website. Until next time, remember, when you want to know William Shakespeare, you have to go behind the curtain and into That Shakespeare Life.